What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and it's time to continue our Saturday morning D&D story time as we pick up where we left off on my D&D 3.5e campaign, aka the first campaign I ever played through. For those of you who are curious, I did upload my character sheet as well as Bob, his animal companion. Those are here on the YouTube community tab if you'd like to view what those character sheets actually look like for yourself. Granted, when I felt the story we're talking through now was when we basically just started at level 6, whereas the character sheets are going to be for him when he's level 12. So, anyway, continuing, and a returning sponsor, our good friends at Magic Spoon, are here to continue with us on our Saturday morning nostalgia trip. So, again, you've heard me talk about Magic Spoon before, but this is cereal reinvented. High-protein, keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, wheat-free, naturally flavored. It is a high-protein, high-quality, filling cereal that gives you kind of all of the nostalgia and flavor of the sugary cereals that we had growing up, but actually now with no sugar and instead high protein. Again, the one that I have here in hand is peanut butter. This is my favorite flavor in the variety pack that you can get over on the Magic Spoon website. But if you were actually to head over there, you can pick up the standard variety pack, which again contains peanut butter, fruity, frosted, and cocoa. But you can also build your own and pick from some of the other flavors they have, like maple waffle, birthday cake, or the new seasonal flavor, pumpkin. But if you'd like to go ahead and pick up, by the way, as I've said before, it's great to just eat this raw out of the box. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning for me. I need a late light snack. I can get a guilt-free, high-protein snack. So, anyway, click the link down below to grab a variety pack for yourself. Be sure to use the promo code NERDIMMERSION at checkout. You get $5 off any order. Or go to magicspoon.com/nerdimmersion. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention, Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. So click the link below or scan the QR code that's somewhere here on screen, and use the code NERDIMMERSION for $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/nerdimmersion to save $5 today. Thank you again to our good friends at Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video. Now, one thing I did say I was going to do if I couldn't find it was show you the miniature that I used to use for Bob, and this is it. We played in our game, just to give you a little bit of more background again, in the back of the 3.5 monster manual, Dungeon Master's Guide, was a white, pure white background with black grid, and then the other side had kind of a dungeon, but we always used the base white grid. And this, roughly, came out to, when you extended it out like this, to around 3 squares, which was 15 feet, which in my head, and I think kind of what happened in our party was, 15 feet is what what is he, a huge animal? A huge animal is 15 feet. But it's 15 by 15, right? A lot of us know that now with, WizKids minis and things like that. This is what we used for Bob. And it also kind of made sense to me, right? He's a crocodile. He's kind of slender. So this piece of neon-colored string that I found in my parents' house, I don't remember where I found this. Somewhere in, like, the basement. It might have been my sister's for something. And I just tied it up into a bunch of tiny knots. And for however long that campaign ran, this was the miniature that I used to represent Bob. So I still have it all these years later. All right, so into the story. Where were we? We had basically ended with, we had gotten into the fight with the werewolves, and Gregor was badly wounded by the werewolves, and we needed to take him to get cured, because again, especially me at this point, I don't know what lycanthropy is in Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if it's a good thing. I don't know if you can control your transformations, if he's just going to turn around and kill us in the night, or what have you. But more importantly, we get to talk about another one of my favorite things. Also, by the way, folks, say hi to Nick in the comments. He actually watched the last video and commented on it. So again, my first ever DM, the one you've heard me talk about in these stories, he's actually watching these videos and commenting on it. So this is a hi for you, Nick. Feel free to shout out and say hi to him as well in the comments. But this session is also where I learned a lot about the DM's ability to just have to sometimes whisk everything away and pretend like it didn't happen. And I'm sure you saw that by the title of this. This is the poop incident story. So we made our way to kind of a local that night, traveling along. So Gregor's been damaged badly. I'm hooked up to the cart as the horse. We're moving to sort of try to get to the city we're heading towards, but hopefully find some sort of like halfway house of healing or something. And there actually is like a road stop in not too far ahead that we eventually find later that night that also has a healer of sorts in it. That's kind of like a known thing. So we make our way there. I turn back into an elf. We bring Gregor in to the healer. And it's, I can't remember if it's a man or a woman, but they're like, oh, Gregor? And we're like, yeah, he got damaged, you know, bit by a werewolf, and he's all scratched up and he's bleeding, and we're really worried about him. What can you do? And they're like, don't worry. Gregor's had this procedure countless times before. This is like run of the mill for him. And then we're like, what? And they're like, yeah, oh yeah, he comes in here bit by a werewolf, scratched up all the time. We fix him up. It's not a problem. We've got this. We know exactly what to do. He's fine. He can handle all the medicine. We'll get him patched up. He should be good to go by morning. And we're like, oh, okay. So then we kind of were like, all right, well, I guess we're just going to stay here for the night and let the healer kind of work on him. And this is before also, by the way, like, I don't know how many spells and stuff. Like, I wasn't still learning how my magic worked. And I'll be honest, one thing that I do want to point out is another thing that Nick kind of allowed me to do, which is not in the vein of 3.5 at all, is I basically, like, I had a printout. I have it here. I found it. Let me see, where is it? I found it somewhere on the internet, and it was basically this printout, which I realize you really can't see, but it was just like a list of, at the time, because here's the thing, back in the day, there were so many 3.5 books that had new spells in them. If you played with, you could play with just the player's handbook, but we were also using other things because we were going to eventually prestige class out and do all this other stuff. We were using other books, but there were so many other spells. I just found somewhere on a forum online that I think I went to the library to print, right? Because who had printers at home, let alone potentially who had, access to the internet was another thing. But it basically printed it out and it had almost every single druid spell. I'll upload these if you guys want, just let me know. But it also would say, it said the spell name, a quick description of it, the school of magic, the components, the time it took to cast, the range, the target effect area, the duration, what kind of saving throw, if it was affected by spell resistance. A lot of you 5e players don't even know what that is. And then what book it was in. So I had this, and this is what I basically used to determine all of my spells. But the way things worked in 3.5 is you needed to prepare those spells. And I had, so many spells per day. Also, 3.5 gave you bonus spells for high-level stats. So I had a very high wisdom. So I actually got an additional first, second, third, and fourth level spell, at least at whatever time we were doing this at. And basically the way it's supposed to work is if I wanted to prepare Cure Light Wounds, which was a D8 plus, I think my level, or the spell level, however it worked, it's been a while. I'd have to say if I wanted to do that, like what we see in 5e is you would prepare Cure Wounds, and then you have that prepared, and you could cast it as many times as you have spell slots, and upcast it and down, upcast it with higher level spell slots. The way it worked back in the day in 3.5 was you had Cure Light Wounds at first level, and then you'd have like Cure Moderate Wounds at third level, which would do 2d8. So they were different spells. And if I had 4 or 5 first level spells per day, and I wanted to prepare Cure Light Wounds, I'd have to prepare Cure Light Wounds 3 times to have it to cast 3 times. As opposed to, like, if I had other spells that I wanted to use, I could only pick 5 spells to prepare per day. So I could say, okay, I want 3, Cure Light Wounds, 1 Entangle, and 1 Fairy Fire, however I wanted to break it down. Because I never fully grasped that, Nick never really pressured me for it and kind of let me run it more like 5e, where I had the whole spell list, and then, like, when I cast a spell, like, I basically had, this was actually way overpowered. Clerics or druids are already overpowered in 3.5, but basically, I had essentially carte blanche access to this entire list, and then I just pick and chose the spells that I was going to use. Now, eventually, I did start to prepare the spells as time went on. Like, okay, I want to have Charm Animal, Cure Light Wounds, Entangle, Produce Flame, and Speak with Animals. And I had those 5, and then again, we kind of ran it like 5e, where if I wanted to cast Cure Light Wounds multiple times, I could do that using my slots as opposed to preparing Cure Light Wounds multiple times. Again, that's just kind of a function. But once again, kind of Nick bending the rules for a newer player, and it actually kind of, and it's why it also seemed like such an easy transition for me to come to 5e. But anyway, the poop incident. Sorry, I know I'm delaying, but I gotta build tension here for this. So the party, myself, our half-elf sorcerer, and our monk. So Aramil, my druid. I think Torin was the name of the monk character, if I recall. And I can't for the life of me remember what the sorcerer's name was. All I know is that, Nick's younger brother played the sorcerer, and obviously he knew a lot more about Dungeons and Dragons than I did, and he had his whole future mapped out for his character, prestige classes, and everything. And we're all sitting around, kind of like on cots in this sort of halfway house waiting for Gregor to get healed on the overnight. And this is actually where Nick pulled out the sort of campfire session concept, because we're all just kind of hanging around waiting. And it was the concept of, or no, actually, I'm sorry. I'm mistaken. Scratch that. But anyway, that was last time. I'm just mixing match. I'm also trying to remember something from literally 20 years ago. But what I do remember very vividly is the poop incident. So I don't remember why, and I can't pretend that I'll ever understand what the reasoning was. But we were all just kind of hanging out, toiling the night away, and like also staying in this halfway house was a family. There was like a mother, a father, and their small, like their younger daughter. And the mother and the father were on one, together, like 2 cots, and then the daughter was on another one. And I don't remember why, but I remember that our sorcerer, for whatever reason, I don't remember why, he was very quick to be like, to react if he was like snubbed in some way or like accused of something, very quick to kind of fly off the handle. And for whatever reason, he decided that he wanted his character to take a shit next to the little girl's bed. So that for some reason, I think his reasoning was that he was going to find a way to use his very high charisma and like diplomacy and deception, or bluff as it was back then, to convince either the people who were running the halfway house healing thing, or her parents, that she did it for some reason. I don't really remember why, but this was what, and I just kind of, me and Torin, our monk, just kind of just sat and watched the whole thing happen. We didn't really get involved in any of this. We just kind of watched the chaos unfold. Well, unfortunately for our sorcerer, his stealth check, or what, hide check, I think it was back in 3.5. I could actually just look at it and tell you. Yeah, hide and move silently didn't go well. And the parents woke up and basically see this half-nymph sorcerer drop trow and is basically in the process of pooping next to their daughter's bed. And it just became a whole thing. And he was constantly trying to use either magic or bluff checks or this and that to try to convince the parents that this was a bad idea, or like it wasn't a bad idea, like it wasn't his fault, he was just doing it or something. I don't remember the reasoning why he tried to convince them that this was like not, like, I mean, his stats were very high to the point where he could probably convince people that like they didn't see this happening with a little bit of magic ensorcelled in there. I think we're talking about, with half nymph stats, we were talking like starting charisma of like 22, 24. Again, for you 5e folks, it's going to sound insane, but that's not unheard of for back in 3.5. So anyway, yeah, and it went for, I think, a half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. of me and the monk, both character and player, just kind of sitting there and observing. And Nick basically having this half an hour, 45-minute argument with his brother about how is this going to work and like what's going to happen. And I just remember being like, again, absorbing everything and just sitting there and like watching like a tennis match ping pong back and forth as Nick would come up with like a no, they're not going to do that. There's no way that'll work. And then his brother come up with like, but what if I did this? And then it just ping pong back and forth. Like I said, it could have been a half an hour, could have been an hour. I don't really remember how long it was. But all I remember is that at one point, Nick just throws up his hands and he goes, you know what? Forget it. None of this happened. You just went to sleep and now it's the next morning and everything's fine. Nobody pooped near anybody's bed. Nothing happened. You wake up and Gregor is healed. And that was another one of those moments where I was like, oh, okay. You don't have to play through every single scenario. And the DM kind of, when it makes sense, has the power to just be like, nope, sorry, not gonna happen. And I've actually seen this in other games too, where like something happens and then the DM breaks. This was an instance more of like it was an ongoing argument and it was just stymieing play. Again, I was more than happy to just watch this argument unfold. But I could also see, like, if this was a game that I was running, now being a DM, and I was having this back and forth, we'd kind of have to be like, all right, let's just make a call and move on. And again, the DM hand wave of, nope, didn't happen. It's the next day. We're moving on. I've seen this happen. If you guys want me to talk about my first ever game in 5e, that's also a good story we can tell after this story is done, where my friend, who was a first ever DM at the time, we broke him so bad that he got up and walked away from the table and just kind of left us to our own devices for about a half an hour while he decompressed and tried to figure it out. And ultimately, in that situation, we kind of ended up just rolling it back and pretending it didn't happen. Anyway, so the next day is upon us. Gregor is patched, a little bruised, a little hurting, but healed enough to make his way back to leading us to the next city. So we all set out in a non-poop-filled situation, and we decide we're going to make our way towards this next city where we're going to deliver this message, this decree of war from the town that we started off in. And I'll be honest, I didn't know, and to take notes, to write anything down, and I honestly wish I had, because I can't remember the names of like any major NPCs other than like a handful here and there. I can't remember the names of any of the towns. I don't remember if we were even in like Greyhawk or in some sort of homebrew setup. Again, Nick, if you're watching, maybe in the comments you have the notes somewhere, or you just remember. You could just throw it in the comments down below. I'd love to hear it, and I'm sure so many people would. Actually, a lot of people commented that they said, I'd love for you to make this into a module. And I'm like, that's insane to me that people would want to play my first ever campaign that I played in as a module. And like, there's something there and it could be written up. I don't know how it would go, but either way. So yes, we made our way towards the next town where we were going to be delivering this decree of war. But first, we found ourselves heading in to a forest, a vast forest that separated us from the town that we were getting to. And as we made our way into the forest, it became very clear to me as a druid that something was off. Not all was as it seemed, and we weren't really sure why. And when we get into the specifics of what happened, I will tell you all about that next Saturday. So, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to go ahead and check out Magic Spoon at the link in the description. It's also going to be a pinned comment as well. So, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.